It's not an easy thing. Serving your country and being on a cell phone, back then pagers, moments notice of pack a bag and go. It's not for everybody, right? And I'm extremely grateful for the 10 plus years I served active before my reserve time. And I know a lot of the lessons that I apply in entrepreneurship are skills and disciplines that I learned in the military.
Welcome to the 7 Eagle Group podcast, your home for inspiring stories, valuable tips, and great advice from hard-charging veterans so you can lead a more rewarding and lucrative post-military career.
All right. Hey, guys, it is Jordy and Josh from 7 Eagle Group. We are so fired up today. We got an amazing guest. You know how important it is for 7 Eagle to help and do our best to match you with careers that are going to ignite your passion and be aligned with your career goals. And one career path that I know is just so popular with veterans and transitioning service members is to work in the outdoors. And today we have with us a U.S. Air Force captain and officer. His name is Dan Adler, and just an amazing guy who not only served our country, but later went on to follow his passion and his calling. And with his wife, Terry, went on to start Diamond Outfitters, which is one of our country's top hunting and tour guide companies. And we're going to have an amazing conversation today. So Dan, thank you so much for jumping on with Josh and me and sharing a little bit about your story.
So excited to be here, Jordy. Thanks, Josh. Happy to help.
Awesome. So we're just going to rotate questions between the two of us. So I'll go first. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what was your childhood like, and what sort of what brought you down the path of military?
Yeah, so I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and was always very passionate about our United States military. Of course, I'm of the Top Gun generation, so I saw Top Gun, I think, in 4th grade. And I was like, this is 100% what I'm doing the rest of my life. There's nothing else I ever want to do. So in 4th grade, I kind of got on this Navy kick. So you mentioned I'm Air Force, and I am, but Navy was my first love. So I'll adjust that a little bit. So anyways, growing up in Phoenix as a kid, as you can imagine, right, one of the hottest places in the United States, in the summers, we always wanted an escape. So our family escape in the summers for weekends or maybe a week, if we could get away with it, was to go to San Diego. Now, if you're an American citizen, you know San Diego. But if you're a Navy guy, you know North Island, you know Naval Air Station, San Diego, Miramar, et cetera. So for me, growing up in the summer, getting to get away from the heat and go on these beaches, well, I had, S3s going over my head. I had Tomcat F-14s going over my head, the early versions of the F-18s going over my head. And then in the Bay, you got the USS Ranger and all these beautiful ships. And it was so patriotic. Well, fast forward 4 years and the Persian Gulf War #1 starts. So I'm in 8th grade and I think I'm a patriot. I have to think about that math. I think I was in 8th grade and I'm a patriot at heart. And I've been spending my summers in San Diego, even got to the point where I was working on fishing boats in the summer to escape the heat in San Diego. And I'm just tore up about going and being a naval aviator. Well, then Gulf War starts out. And when the Gulf War started, believe it or not, I stayed home from school 3 days in a row just watching the news. That's how ramped up I was. I had the yellow ribbons on my trees at the house, and I just couldn't believe in my lifetime that there was a war going on in the United States, not necessarily on our home soil, but the United States was at war. So it was just overwhelming to me and just doubled down on the fact that I was going to serve my country. So fast forward now, all these experiences to my freshman year at college at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to go do this ROTC thing. I want to be a commissioned officer. Initially, I thought I wanted to go the civilian route and become finance. And then my first day of accounting 101, I was like, I want nothing to do with this. I don't want to go into finance. And then when I had my first appointment with an ROTC recruiter, they're like, well, kind of one of the cool things about joining ROTC is you already have a job when you graduate college. And they kind of said, wouldn't that make a big difference to you if you didn't have to worry about 4 years from now, right? Having to get a job, have an officer's pay in the military. So that got my attention. So my first appointment with the University of Arizona ROTC Navy recruiter, for whatever reason, to this day, I still don't know, they didn't show up. Whatever. I was disappointed because I'm a military guy by heart. I showed up 5 minutes early to this appointment with you guys and you already logged on, right? That's just who we are. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. So I log on at 1:53 and you guys are already here. And I'm like, of course you're already here. I'm not early. So anyway, so I reschedule with this Navy recruiter, and the Navy recruiter doesn't show up again. This is a true story. And to this day, I still don't know why. But I went home and I told my mom and my godfather on the phone, because I was in Tucson now and they were in Phoenix. I said, yeah, it's really weird. The Navy recruiter doesn't show up. And I'll never forget this. My godfather says to me, he goes, hey, just a question, like, airplanes have always been your passion. So why the Navy? And I didn't necessarily go into growing up in the summers in San Diego, but I did come to the conclusion of, I love airplanes. I guess I could go give the Air Force recruiter a try too. So I scheduled a plane with the Air Force recruiter. Well, that guy showed up on time and closed me all in one meeting. So I never even did a Navy ROTC interview. I signed my contract as a freshman at the U of A in '95 and never looked back. So I maybe was destined to be a naval aviator or whatever, but ended up in the Air Force, and that ended up being my path. So that's kind of my background and how I ended up in the military.
Go ahead, Josh. Hit him.
Oh, it's awesome, man. I'm kind of glad you came to the Air Force. Like I said, 20 years in the United States Air Force, and the amount of responsibility, but not only that, just the amount of things that have been given to me and my family is amazing. So I thank you for your service. That's absolutely amazing. Now, one of the things here, in Seven Eagle Group, like Jordy alluded to earlier offline, we like to make sure that we get our transitioning service members and our veterans on a path to success where they want to be. We don't want them to zigzag all over and try and find their career that they want, and then they don't. And then, they end up hating life by the time they're age, 60 years old, 50 years old, whatever it may be. So we try to put them on that path right away to make sure, like, hey, go this way, let's get it done. You are a successful owner and operator of one of the largest full-time guide services in North America. Can you tell us how your entrepreneurship started, and literally from the Air Force to where you are now?
Absolutely. Great question. So when I went into the Air Force, I think like a lot of people, I had no doubt that I was going to do that for at least 20, maybe 30 years. My initial thoughts on going in was I was going to do this as a career. And a couple of my best friends from grade school were also enlisting, or actually some of them enlisted after high school while I was in college. So by the time I got out of college and went into active duty, they were in their fourth year saying the same thing. We were in the fourth year of active duty. We're staying career. I was in my first year. I was going to stay career. They were in other services, but we all just had this idea of we were going to stay career. And as happens with a lot of military folks, you get a lot of different influences. You get a lot of, whether it's family or friends, or, oh, my buddy stayed in and re-upped, or my buddy got out, or, this company is hiring, maybe this is the time to get out. And then there's this concept of, which I don't even know if it's factually true, but in our minds, there's this concept of when you get around 8, 10, maybe 12 years, it's like it's kind of your now or never moment, which for a lot of my friends still wasn't the case of whether to stay out. But as I kind of went through those journeys myself, I found a couple things extremely rewarding in the military. And as you know, there's a lot of hardships, a lot of time away from home. And then being an officer on the officer side for me, especially on the aircraft maintenance side, which is where I spent a lot of my time, I was blessed to be surrounded by the most incredible group of enlisted NCOs, senior NCOs, chiefs. And in my particular career field, I wasn't surrounded by a lot of officers. I was basically, even as a second lieutenant butter bar, I was in charge of a shop of 400 back shop F-15 maintainers. But the blessing was I had an EA, a senior master sergeant, in my office who'd been doing the same job since before I was born. So he and I were in charge. I had the rank, but if anybody was smart, knew he had the power and the education. So to answer your question, I knew immediately my first day on the job, I wasn't going to show up and pretend because I was some lieutenant that I ran the place. I was like, hey, look, you don't know me yet, but I already love my job. I already love my troops. And I'm pretty much going to follow you everywhere you go every day, 12 hours a day, except for the bathroom, for as long as I'm assigned to this unit. And we got along brilliantly from the beginning. When he went on to have an amazing career, I was one of the guys that signed his EPR to get him promoted to chief, which he certainly deserved. And so through this process, I was like, yeah, career, probably be career. And then as I went on my career, Some of my best friends got out. Some of my best friends stayed in. I had some family influences. I had been married now, but didn't have kids, and wondered what that experiment would be like if I had kids. My point with the story of all that being surrounded by the enlisted guys, they'd been in for a long time. So I had great influences of people that had been in 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years and was doing it with the family. Some doing it brilliantly. For some, it was more of a struggle. And so I was taking notes, right? Mental notes on all of the successes, failures, accomplishments, disappointments, and kind of put that all into my own playbook. Like, what does that look like to me? And in probably 2004, somewhere around there, I got introduced to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's book for the first time. And that was the first time where I was exposed, in my mind, to truly entrepreneurship, because I'd gone to college, I'd gone to the military. I thought I would do 20 years, get a pension. Now, I don't mean any negativity when I say this, but in some of my speaking engagements now, I kind of call this idea of, and it's not a military thing, the corporate world idea of, call it Ford or GM. You go to work for corporate America for 20 years, then you get a pension, run off to the sunset. I talk about that now in my coaching classes as, I call it the big lie of corporate America. I think they kind of want to lull us into that concept of you have to stay there to get this pension. Well, entrepreneurship taught, starting Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which, by the way, isn't the best of his books. It's just the most known one. But I started learning about entrepreneurship and started thinking, what would it be like if I made the leap and started my own companies? And for my family, my immediate family, it was insane. Like my mom, who's one of my most influential figures in my life, we're talking 20 years ago, was like, you're at 10 years in the military, you got 10 years to go, you'll have a pension and medical for life, or your wife, like, why would you ever consider it? And of course, she doesn't know this path I'm going through with studying entrepreneurship. So I started studying entrepreneurship, started there, then graduated to guys like Mark Willis, Gary Keller, Teresa Barnaby, and some other very heavy influencers. And then I just told my wife one night, I think I want to do this. So there we were with a grease board, pluses and minuses, staying in and getting out. And one of the biggest pluses, and I'll wrap with this, was she was a successful physical therapist. And so, as you guys know, physical therapists are needed everywhere. So anywhere I was stationed, she had a job, right? First day we were there, she was hired, right? So we knew if I made this plunge to get out and literally abandon officer pay, flight pay, if I was deployed, tax free or duty free, hazardous duty pay, all these things I was foregoing, I'm all on the back of my wife's potential job as a physical therapist, where she would be the sugar mama for a while. So that was it. When we made that grease board and made the big decision. And I know a lot of veterans listening to this, or people who are active duty or reservists thinking about getting out, like that's a big part of it. Is there are going to be a ton of pluses, guys and gals, and there's going to be a ton of negatives. And I'm happy to talk about any of them. But it's at the end of the day, it's an intently personal decision. I watched senior NCOs who had flourishing families with 20 and 30-year careers. I watched families who were only in 3 or 4 years, and there was a high divorce rate in the military, as there is in corporate America. It's not an easy thing. Serving your country and being on a cell phone, back then, pagers, moments notice of pack a bag and go. It's not for everybody, right? And I'm extremely grateful for the 10 plus years I served active before my reserve time. And I know a lot of the lessons that I apply in entrepreneurship are skills and disciplines that I learned in the military. And I'm really blessed in that not only did I did military, so I've seen the federal side of employment, but then I was in corporate America when I first got out, because I started 2 companies, one in real estate and one in guiding. So I saw corporate America through real estate, where I had endless opportunities to lead and supervise, and entrepreneurship. So I feel like I got this beautiful dose of the 3 type of business environments: corporate, small business ownership, and federal/government, military, to kind of pull all these resources from to make my businesses grow and thrive.
That's great, man. Good. I enjoyed hearing all about that, your journey there. Can you talk a little bit about, Dan, about when you first came in contact with hunting? Like what was that? What was that early journey into hunting? And then why did you decide you want to do this as your career path? Like, why did you decide, hey, I love it so much, I'm going to go start a business and help share this with others?
Sure. Funny story. So my grandfather on my mom's side was a big time fisherman, not a hunter, but a big time fisherman. So I kind of got this first love of the outdoors for fishing from him. And sadly for me and my family, he passed away when I was only 5 years old, but he willed me his fishing gear. And so this fishing then took on almost a spiritual take at that time too. And I wasn't yet interested in hunting. I had very few friends who were hunters at that age. And my parents were almost anti-gun, borderline anti-gun, borderline anti-hunting, maybe not quite, but close. So I didn't have that influence. Like most guys you talk to about hunting, it's like my dad, my grandpa, my uncle, right? I didn't have any of that. So I was first generation hunter in my family. But what did happen was in fifth grade, so I've been fishing, from ages 5 to 11 or whatever fifth grade is. And in my life in fifth grade is this kid named Greg Joel, still one of my best friends today, just lives on the other side of the mountain. We were hunting together 40 years later. We were hunting together 2 months ago in September. And we're friends. We play basketball because I was really into basketball and fishing. And he says, hey, we're going four-wheeling this weekend up in the North Country. Do you want to go? And I'm like, what's four-wheeling? And he's like, oh, it's where you like go in a four-wheel drive vehicle, go up in the mountains off pavement and go look at critters and stuff. And I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing. Let's go. So 11-year-old me goes in. Now, the first thing we did when we left his house, it's about an hour drive to where we were going to go four-wheeling. The first thing we did, this is fifth grade Dan Adler, was we stopped at Dunkin' Donuts. And I learned that if you go four-wheeling with Greg and his dad, their first stop is Dunkin' Donuts. You get any donut you want and a carton of milk. And I'm like, where do I sign up for this? Right. And so then we went off to the mountains and I saw a Rocky Mountain elk for the first time. And the first time I ever saw a Rocky Mountain elk in the wild, it changed my life. I know exactly where it was to this day, 40 some years later, in the Blue Ridge Reservoir. And I didn't necessarily in that moment think I wanted to be a hunter, but it was like an out of body, almost biblical experience. And it still gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And so I kind of became obsessed with wildlife. I kind of became obsessed with the outdoors. But even when we went back to classroom after this first time I went, I was still a fisherman. But I was like, when it comes to hunting, even though they're big hunters, I'm like, I'll just go and take pictures. You guys can hunt. I wasn't anti-hunting, but I wasn't a hunter. Well, a little bit over time, more friends in my life were in that circle. They were cowboys and rodeos and hunting and fishing. And so that kind of became my circle in grade school and then high school. And so I think I want to say 7th or 8th grade was where I first had my own first big game tag. And so then I became obsessed with hunting. And then in the military, I became obsessed with hunting terrorists. So it was kind of like this natural evolution of, okay, I'm a hunter. And it just depends if I'm in my blues or my camo, I'm hunting terrorists. And if I'm in my woodsy camo, then I'm hunting elk and deer. But I want to say I killed terrorists for a living for my country. The hunting side of it, of wildlife, was the North American conservation model. It wasn't to protect the flag. It wasn't to protect my family. The true North American conservation model that really started with Teddy Roosevelt basically says, wildlife needs shelter, space, food, and a place to safely breed. And over the course of 100 plus years, our states, agencies, and federal agencies have said, okay, every piece of open space, whether it's private land or public land, has a carrying capacity of animals. It doesn't matter if it's elk or deer or antelope, there's a carrying capacity. And most animals don't need help from humans to keep their numbers in check. They do fine on their own with natural selection predation. But then there's the huntable species, specifically on this continent we'll talk about today, your elk, your deer, your antelope, some of the desert bighorn sheep species, some of the bison, some of that need human interaction to keep that number in check. And without that number being in check, they'll die of starvation, they'll die off of disease. These animals will die off in car accidents, higher in action. So these state agencies and these federal agencies are charged with knowing what these numbers are. So I became fascinated with that process. And then while I was active duty thinking about entrepreneurship and getting out, I went back to working on those fishing boats in San Diego in the summers that I described earlier. And I thought, that captain of that boat, Tim Green, who to this day is still one of my closest mentors and friends, and on my payroll, by the way, 35, 40 years later, he's now one of my hunting guides, my first boss. I said, Captain Green fished full time. You can actually do this and make a living. Like, I thought you can't, but I remember I worked for him and that was his only job. So I kind of thought, okay, I've got Robert Kiyosaki and other entrepreneurs in my left ear. And I've got proof of concept from my youth as a teenager that, well, he made it a living in the fishing world. I wonder if I could make a living in the hunting world. And to your point, Jordy, when I told some of my friends I was thinking about getting out of the military to start Diamond Outfitters, a hunting guide outfit, a lot of them said, "Oh, that's really cute. What else are you going to do to make a living?"
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm the kind of guy that, like, when I hear something like that, I'm like, oh,
Get
I
out of
know
my
where
way.
the bar is. Or another way I like to say that is, until your friends are laughing at you, your goals aren't big enough. Right. So when I heard them say, "That's cute, what else are you going to do?" I was like, okay, sounds like a challenge. So, fast forward to where we are blessed to be today as the largest outfitter in North America. It's like, you can do this as a living. You can really, and for everybody listening to this, like, we already know this as military veterans and friends and spouses of family members of military veterans. We live in the greatest, freest country in the world. Are we perfect? No. But are we an unbelievable opportunity where somebody like me could just wake up one day, and somebody like any American citizen could wake up one day and go, "I want to be a hunting guide for the rest of my life. That's what I want to do professionally. I want to run a podcast the rest of my life. I want to drive an Uber the rest of my life. I want to make a pizza the rest of my life. I want to be a lawyer the rest of my life, a doctor the rest of my life." Guys, there's very few countries in the world where we can do this. We're so blessed that we live here. We're so fortunate. It's no wonder the rest of the world wants to come here legally or illegally. I would too. My family escaped Hitler to be here. So this is still, despite all our problems, it's still the greatest, freest country in the world. So, for veterans that are watching this, or soon to be veterans that are still serving, like, this is still the land of milk and honey. Like, if you believe in it bad enough and you're willing to work hard enough for it, and especially if you have support, the support could be your spouse, your parents, your children, and whoever that circle is, you really can do anything. Is it going to be easy? No. You're going to get a lot of handouts on the way up? No. Is there going to be a ton of failure? Yeah. Is it worth it? At the end of the day, I believe entrepreneurship is really, really worth it. I do score on the high end of risk tolerance. So I do have to acknowledge entrepreneurship may not be for everybody. My wife's risk tolerance is a lot lower. I think it's come up over the last 23 years that we've been together. But there are risks and rewards and everything. But just know there's no limits to what you can do in the United States of America.
Roger that.
Yeah, it's so inspirational to know that that's exactly how everything formed for you from when you were such a young kid. Going back when you said you didn't grow up in a hunting family, almost anti-gun, anti-hunting. Complete opposite for me. Growing up in rural Pennsylvania, that's what we had. We had off-road, we had four-wheeling, right? I had dirt bikes, four-wheelers, guns. We had everything. Okay. Even growing up, even before me, we still do to this day. My family owns a huge plot of land in northern Pennsylvania, right along the border, and that's our hunting cabin. And that hunting cabin has been there forever. I remember growing up there when I was a little kid, and before it became the cabin that we built today, of course, we used to not have indoor plumbing to where I'd have to run, 100 yards to go to the outhouse in, 2 feet of snow, and then worry about the black bear that's possibly out there trying to, because my uncle put a salt lick out or whatever, or some corn, worrying about those things. It's crazy. Because a lot of that influence that I had from when I was a kid has inspired me and influenced me to what I do today, and still keeping with that. Where you said you were handed down your the gear, the fishing gear, right? I have the same thing in our family, but ours are with rifles. And when our kids turn a certain age, they get their first rifle, and that rifle is handed down. So I have a rifle actually from my grandfather, who shot his first deer with it, and then I have it, and then it goes to my son, and then he uses it. And I actually shot my first deer with that specific rifle. It's a over under 30-30 Marlin lever action. Absolutely love it. One of the best brush guns ever. But a lot of that influenced me to today. Going rewind, and I was in the military. When I first got in the military, I wasn't supposed to be here, to be honest with you. I was in college, and I never expected to be here. But in 20 years later, here I am. Okay, and I'm about to retire, which is amazing. And it afforded me so many opportunities, and I understand that a lot of people don't get afforded those opportunities. You yourself, with your risk tolerance, I have a high risk tolerance as well, but I think it more comes alongside of my body, to where I put my body in danger most of the time. But it is what it is. I don't mind. My eye's kind of healing up right now. Actually, it was a little black and blue last week, but it's truly inspirational. And for you to share that story with all of us, And everybody that's watching, I hope that they can take something away from that, just that little story, and find that inspiration, and understand that, hey, you don't always have to go corporate America route. You can go ahead and do what you love. Because I love motorcycles. I want to work on motorcycles. Okay, I want my own little shop and just tinker with bikes. So I'm happy you shared that. And what I do know, based off of that you actually do hire veterans that work for you, as well as first responders, which is amazing. So, like, just a little statistics here. So 5.3 million veterans right now under the age of 50 are in the U.S. Okay, among them, 241,000 are actually unemployed. That's 60% of them are between the ages of 25 and 54, which is, to me, personally, is atrocious, because I think that our veterans have given so much to this country, and so much that sacrifice, not only them but their family and their friends, that they deserve better. Okay, considering their skills, their experiences, I just would think that they would be, much more much more employed than they are now. So with Diamond Outfitters, I know that you do contribute to helping veterans find work. So can you share more about your company's role in supporting veteran hiring, as well as the impact it has on both the business as well as the individuals?
Absolutely. So one of the things we talked about, I think off air, was that there's this piece of you. I can't speak for everybody. There was a piece of me when I left the service that was like, man, what can I ever do that will give me as much pride and joy as saying, as an officer in the Air Force, saying I was in real estate, give me that same sense of satisfaction. Saying I'm a hunting guide, give me that same sense of satisfaction. So there was this piece of me that was ready to start a family and be done with all that. But then there's this continuous need to serve that's probably even more amplified now today at 48 years old than it was before. And so when I first started building the company, at first, of course, like most entrepreneurs, you're totally broke. You have no money. So you certainly aren't hiring anybody, but you are working 18, 19-hour days. In my business as an outfitter, far away from home for days, weeks at a time. And it was like, wow, this looks a lot familiar to what I was already doing. Maybe I should have just stayed in the military, right? I knew I was building. My wife was helpful and patient, knew we were building something special, and that we both believed in it. And so when the time came where we were having just a touch of traction, I'm like, okay, I'm going to need some help if we really want to scale and grow the business. So I said, who are the people that are going to really be the most professional, have the highest level of integrity? Who are the people that are going to have a customer-focused heart, servience heart, lead by example? Who are people that are going to be safe in a firearms environment where people might be excited or nervous? Maybe we call it buck fever in our world. Those are going to be the people that have served our country. Those are going to be people that understand dress. That's going to be your military. That's going to be your cops. It's going to be your firefighters, your EMTs, people that have been in these difficult, stressful situations. And I was biased towards them. In full disclosure, like I sometimes joke around, like one of the reasons why my team members are 1099 as opposed to W-2 is, like, if they were W-2 employees, I can't just outwardly say I give preference to veterans. I don't think I can. But if they're 1099 independent contractors, I can say with a clear conscience legally, like, hey, I give preferential treatment to military, first responders, things like that. I may or may not be right, but in my heart, I'm like, that makes sense. So I just knew that there was a lot of things going on. And to be clear, some of it was selfish, because these are the people I want to hang out with. Right. I want to hang out with high level thinkers, high level achievers, people that are motivated, people that show up to work on time, people that don't mind working all day, people that aren't going to sit around a campfire while the cook is still doing dishes. Right. Like, those are the people I wanted to align. So some of it was selfish, was who do I want to align with? Who do I want to be in business with? I've always said who you're in business with really matters. And so if I can be with people who inspire me and make me want to be better, and who have the servient heart, who have this ability to provide this high level of service. And then at the same time, these are people that don't panic when things don't go their way, right? These are people that understand adversity. These are people that understand equipment failures. These are people that understand that for this whole thing to come together, there's a continuity that needs to happen. Before C can happen, A and B need to happen in this order. And if it happens and it all works together, then that's where the magic is. So I knew that if I was picky and aligning myself with military veterans, first responders, that I'd get that higher level thinker, more successful under pressure, less likely to crack, less likely to quit if we were doing long days. I knew where that talent pool was, and that served me very well. And to a lesser extent, I've seen almost a similar talent pool when I've hired guides that have been lifelong rodeo cowboys. So like these lifelong rodeo cowboys, not only do they get the American spirit and the American dream similar to the rest of us, they've lived it, but they also know what an 18-hour day is. When a lot of us start our day, we go from our heated or air conditioned home to our heated or air conditioned car to our heated or air conditioned office. Not everybody, but a lot. And in our world as outfitters, we go from a hot or cold camp to, if we're wrangling and guys are loading up horses, that's 2 hours possibly before the clients are even awake. Then we take them hunting all day. Then we feed them, and then they go to bed and then the guides stay up and do the dishes, put away the livestock, and finish their own chores. So it's a group that doesn't mind honest day's work for an honest day pay, but they'll also look you in the eyes and tell you what's good. They'll tell you what's bad. They'll tell you what's working. They'll tell you what's failing. And we all succeed together as a team. And so I've just always enjoyed being around that person, that mindset, man or woman. And I'm inspired to do better when I surround myself in that environment. I always joke in entrepreneurial meetings, like if I'm ever the smartest person in the room, I'm by far in the wrong room. I want to go to a mastermind or a business conference or an entrepreneurship workshop where I'm like the biggest idiot there, despite all my successes. I literally want to gravitate towards that. And I feel the same way about hiring guys. It's like, I want to selfishly hire because I know what level of experience they're going to give to my customers, but I also know selfishly I'm going to learn from them too. And God willing, I could be a great leader for them as well.
That's awesome. Dan, I know a lot of the people watching this are hunters like Josh. They are going to be very interested in Diamond Outfitters. Can you talk a little bit about the company, about the big game hunts that you go on, the places you've gone to? If you could mention a couple of maybe some of your favorite or most memorable hunts over the years and give people a little taste.
Sure. So professionally speaking, where we do our guiding and outfitting is in Arizona, New Mexico, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada. And we're doing that on a little over 30 million acres. And there's no fences in any of the stuff we hunt. So we call it fair free range or fair chase hunting. So nothing's fenced. I can't promise, Josh comes out here and does an elk hunt. I can't promise him he's going to get an elk. It's not a high fence hunt. What I will tell him is, hey, whether you get an elk or not, it's between you and God. Our job's to arrange the meeting. Now, you guys may recognize that a little bit. Wasn't World War II famous general has said a similar quote. I forget, it might have been Eisenhower, who said something about, our enemy, our job was just to arrange the meeting. But so I may or may not have stolen that quote. But so that's the States. And then out of the US, we do some work in amazing places like Ireland, Africa, Argentina, New Zealand, and that list is continuing to grow. Sonora, Mexico. In all, in just North America, we're guiding for about 17 different species of big game animals. And that's going to be elk, mule deer, white-tailed deer, the 3 different sheep species, from desert to Rocky Mountain bighorn to California bighorn, free-range North American bison or buffalo, pronghorn antelope, 3 species of turkeys, javelina. Some of our most popular hunts are black bear and mountain lion, oryx, ibex, aoudad, Shiras moose. We could go down the list, but so that's the animals that we've learned to guide and take our clients on with a high degree of success. As far as adventures, the elk, which this is a Rocky Mountain elk behind me here, it's the largest deer in North America, except for the moose, part of the deer family anyways. For those that don't know, in the September breeding season, what we call the rut, they bugle. You can Google it. You can watch my TV show episodes on our website. They let out this amazing bugle. The only thing that's really close to it on this continent is in the spring, the turkeys, they gobble to attract a mate, the elk bugle. So anytime you can interact with wildlife, in other words, when an elk bugles, you can actually, as a hunter, bugle back and have this interaction where you try to call it in to close range for an ethical shot. Same thing with turkey, but not all wildlife you can do that. So when you ask me some of my best adventures on the North American continent, it certainly is elk hunting in that early September, October when they're bugling and you're actually interacting with them and calling them in for your clients. And you actually recognize these bulls' bugles and you know which is which bull. Overseas, I would put, geez, it's really hard, but probably New Zealand. Oh, man. But I took Purple Hearts to Africa.
Wow.
Had an amazing hunt in Ireland and Argentina where we were able to honor some veterans too. So it's difficult to pick, but definitely elk when they're bugling, even if you're not a hunter, just even as an outdoor enthusiast, if you can get out west in mid to late September, first week of October, where there's elk and just go listen to them interact. I mean, it is thunderous. It is a huge, and you can, as I said, you can watch them on our videos. But I would say that's at the top. And then just some of the adventures that hunting has taken me, as I said, some of the veterans hunts overseas, but even just some of the hunts I've taken family and friends on, including, by the way, Tim Green, my first boss. We went to New Zealand together with a bunch of his family almost 2 years ago now. I think those are some of them that are at the top, but I'll be honest with you guys, and you guys probably can appreciate this. Like every adventure is special. Like anytime you get out in nature, it's special. Anytime you're able to go travel the world and try new foods and experience new cultures and new languages. Like to me, it's so inspiring. I'll never forget my first night in Africa with my wife and son, who was 8 at the time. He's 18 now. We were kind of holding hands and watching the sun go down. Now, in a lot of countries, third world countries especially, they're extremely dependent on fire, food, fuel, heat, you name it. South Africa is certainly one of them. So when the sun goes down in South Africa, it's one of the most beautiful sunsets you've ever seen in the world. For better or for worse, it's largely because there's so much smoke in the air. So the first time I watched the sun go down with my wife and son in Africa, my son was never planning. I was never planning on taking him to Africa. It was a very last minute thing. The professional hunters in South Africa were just kept encouraging us. Like, you got to bring him. I promise it'll be magical. I promise. We finally trusted him. That first sunset, I literally looked at the sky and I was like, okay, I'm literally exactly where I'm supposed to be in this moment.
That's great.
And so I've had those experiences on different continents with the people I love the most, and it's been pretty powerful. So it's hard to pick one, but again, you get a chance to go listen to elk in the wild, do it.
Why don't you ask him one more, Josh, and I'll ask him one more. And
So I absolutely love the rut season just because the buck themselves are just blind to everything because they're chasing one thing and one thing only, which makes our life a lot easier, of course. But also, you said about buck fever. I've been there, when I was younger, when I first started hunting, and I still remember it to this day. And that I thought it was a doe at first, and then all of a sudden he just reared his head, and then those antlers just like came out from behind the trees, and I was like, holy crap. And long story short, I didn't get him because buck fever, but that was before. Now it's a little different, a little more composed, considering everything that I've been through. Now, what about your mountain lions? Like, how about the mountain lions? Did you get how are those? Because that would seem extremely scary to me.
So mountain lion hunting, to do it at the highest level, is really accomplished with highly trained dogs, hound dogs. So believe it or not, the most exciting part of a mountain lion hunting adventure is not the moment where you actually get your mountain lion. It's actually watching the dogs interact. So think of this as like actually one of our bear teams we call Bear Team 6 in honor of SEAL Team 6. But think of your hound dogs as the most elite Olympic athletes you could imagine. And it's a little bit controversial because some people that aren't familiar with the process think, oh, geez, raising dogs to be hunting dogs is cruel or dangerous or whatnot. But this is a breed of dogs, these particular breeds of hounds, that this is since the dawn of time. That's what they were. They were hunter trackers, whether they're blood trackers or scent trackers, whatever the case may be. So in the case of mountain lion dogs, the best part by far is you as the customer getting to interact with the dogs and learning that these are extremely high-end, tip-of-the-spear athletes. They're not pets. That doesn't mean their owners and handlers don't love them as family members, because they 1,000,000% do. But these aren't animals that come in the house and get pet. These are animals that live in a kennel and they're on an athletic diet and an athletic training program, and they don't get to hunt every day because they'd get injured. It's very extremely regimented. But these are extremely elite athletes. They're dogs, but they're extremely elite athletes at the very tip of their game to be able to go out on a mountain lion hunt. And there's several different kinds of ways this goes down, but I'll give you a short version of it. I have what we call catch dogs, chase dogs, and bay dogs. So if you're going along and let's say you're what's called rig style hunting, where you have a bunch of dogs in dog boxes, and maybe you're driving in a fresh snow and you come across a mountain lion track. Well, a wise hunter doesn't drop all of his dogs on these tracks necessarily. The first groups of dogs you want to drop off on these tracks are the dogs that are really good at scent and detecting direction of track and travel and where this lion might be going. And with the high technology that's out there now, we put collars on these dogs for not only their safety and security, but also we can watch them now on a moving map and go, okay, the dogs are based on the dog's movements on these GPS collars on the map. They're either, maybe getting close to actually physically chasing the lion as opposed to just a track. Well, if you see that happening, then the next set of dogs you might release are what I call the catch dogs. These are the dogs that are now really highly trained at once they're actually, they may not be as good at tracking, but once they actually smell the lion itself or see the lion itself, they're more effective at helping get that lion to the ultimate goal for the hunter, which is to get him either high up in a tree where the cat thinks he can get away from the dogs, or bait up in the bluffs and cliffs. And then that last group of dogs is when you've got the lion moving, then you'll put the bay dogs. These are the dogs that will hold the lion at bay. What lion won't want to jump out of the tree, things like that. So again, that is a far more fascinating process to watch, especially over a course of a 5-day hunt than the actual harvest of the lion. Because honestly, by that point, that part can be pretty anticlimactic. But getting to know the dogs, watching the dog interact with its handler, seeing how athletic they are and beautiful they are and how they work as a pack. And then, now some people may laugh at this, but it's really true. Then watching how the dogs interact with the client. Like the dogs know who its handler is. They've been born and raised with their handler, the houndsman. But when they are introduced to the client, they're like, okay, this is Jordy. This is the guy that's coming to get the lion. So this is my buddy, and he's the one I also want to please. So these dogs are so smart. They're so in tune to their world. They know who the client is. They know what the mission is, right? If we were talking military speak, they know what the end game goal is. And now it's just mission execution. So each dog has its own job, but when done well and as a team, the end result is, Jordy's going to get a big lion because everything came together. So I wouldn't call it scary. I mean, if I was mano a mano face to face with a mountain lion, for sure, that would be a different experience. But that really doesn't happen till the end. Ultimately, your final shot on mountain lions anywhere from like 20 feet to 30 or 40 yards. So we're not talking about great distance. But the magic is in watching the dogs. The magic is in watching the dogs and the handler over the course of this 5-day incredible hunting outing and vacation. And, I've got a lion here. And again, same thing, kind of the story is actually, I got that on a veteran's hunt. I was guiding a veteran and we glassed up this mountain lion. And I told the veteran, I'm like, you need to shoot that mountain lion. It could be like a once in a lifetime opportunity. You never see mountain lions in the wild. It's really, we're really blessed. And he goes, I don't have a mountain lion tag. And I'm like, no, I thought didn't we talk about like you picking up a mountain lion tag? They're only like $14 or something. And he goes, yeah, you told me about that. And I'm like, I would have bought you one. He's like, I just figured that you had one. And if we saw one that you would shoot it. He's like, it's the least I can do. Again, here's a multi-wounded Purple Heart worried about me when I'm trying to show him a good time. So literally I got that mountain lion while guiding a veteran with a traumatic brain injury who purposefully didn't buy a lion tag because his opinion and thought was he wanted to come from contribution was if we were lucky enough to see one, which is incredibly rare, he wanted me to get it. So not only did I get a mountain lion, then 2 days later, he got a giant deer and finished with this. He gave me a shadow box of the American flag that he had with him in Iraq. Now, as you guys know, shadow boxes or flags are often reserved for your own personal retirement or even more so at a funeral or other positions of honor. But in my office, which you're not seeing now, that shadow box from that client has the highest position of honor in my office because I didn't get one for my service directly or indirectly, and I'm certainly very much not dead yet. So that flag will come later. But that shadow box he gave me of a flag he served with in Iraq as appreciation for the hunt, it's one of the greatest gifts a client's ever given me. And I got my mountain lion at the, while he was there to be a part of it. So, it's kind of cool in our community. What happens when you try to do right by somebody else, and then, the favor shined on you as well.
No doubt, man. Well, I can tell, I think Josh is filling out his application to go on a big game hunt with you as we're talking here. He's salivating. So you're a great storyteller. You got to be like,
I hope you give better discounts.
What'd you say?
I said, I hope he gives better discounts.
Yeah. Hey,
I do.
Dan,
I do.
We can't thank you enough for what you've done for our country, for your incredible journey of how you started this company that we can tell you care deeply about your fellow service members, first responders, people who also have served, and just doing an amazing job. It's so inspiring, and I can't wait to share this with the community. And please, anyone who has at all interest in learning more about Diamond Outfitters, we'll put the link and everything in the description. But check out their webpage. Check out what he's doing. It's you mentioned you have TV show, did you say, or a internet show where people can get behind the scenes and see all the incredible hunts that they do and all that. So Dan, thanks again, man, for taking some time today to chat with us.
Well, thank you both for having me. Thank you for your service, Josh. Thank you for your contributions to our veterans, Jordy. It's the same as serving, so give yourself some credit. You're doing a great thing. And thank you to all the men and women listening to this. Thank you for your service. Our nation owes you a debt we'll never be able to repay. God bless you and your families.